Hello and welcome to Pattern of the Ages, a podcast about the Amazon Prime show, The Wheel of Time. My name is Tony, and joining me is Ryan.
Hey, I'm glad to be back for episode 2 to talk about the show.
Today, we will be discussing and recapping episode 2 of The Wheel of Time, titled Shadows Waiting. Please note there will be spoilers for this episode and all episodes before it. So if you haven't watched yet, you may want to pause and come back later. However, we will be avoiding spoilers for all future episodes. We will begin the show with a recap of the episode, and afterwards we will discuss our overall impressions of the episode. But first, a little follow-up from episode 1. I wanted to mention that in episode 1, I referred to Rand and Tam as being blacksmiths, but they are not blacksmiths. It is Perrin and Perrin's wife who are the blacksmiths. So I regret the error and just wanted to acknowledge it here right up front. And my mini apologies. So with that being said, let's jump right into the recap. Ryan, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So the episode, like you said, is called Shadows Waiting, and it's directed by the same person who directed the first episode. Her name is Uta Breezewitz, and this episode was written by Amanda Schumann. And the opening scene that we had was this camp in the woods, which is full of White Cloaks, who's a new faction that we're introduced to. And the sort of leader of the White Cloaks is there, and he's kind of eating a meal and being a little standoffish. And we see that he's actually burning one of the Aes Sedai alive in his camp.
Yeah, he's burning the witch.
Yeah.
I mean, more or less, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if they said it in the episode, but his name is Eamon, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, so chalk up another Game of Thrones similarity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was an interesting start.
Yeah, for sure. So that introduces the whole idea that there are that the Aes Sedai can die. I mean, I guess we were to assume that they could, but I don't think that them being very powerful, you'd never know like how their mythology is supposed to be arranged. So we've established, so that scene does some things. It establishes that the Aes Sedai can die, and that they are these people called the White Cloaks who really dislike the
Yeah.
Aes Sedai, and there's at least one of the White Cloaks that is actively hunting down Aes Sedai and keeping their rings as
Mm-hmm.
little tokens of their victory.
Yeah.
So that's basically, that was kind of the cold open of the show, and then that leads into the, I think, to the credit scene or the opening credits.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the opening credits, we have a scene involving the Trollocs again.
Yeah, so it sort of starts off right where the last episode ended.
Yeah.
So we have our group of Moraine, Lan, Egwin, Matt, and Perrin, and they're all running from the Trollocs. And they chase them to basically a river, right?
Right. Yep.
And eventually they get to where there is a ferry, and they want the ferry keeper to have him use the ferry to get them to cross the river.
Right. So he's reluctant to do it because it's very late at night, and so he says, "We'll wait until my son gets back." But who knows? That the implication is that that won't be for a long while, and they say we cannot wait that long. So here's, we'll double, we'll give you a bunch of money to do it now. And so they begin going across the river, and this also establishes the fact that Trollocs are like, their kryptonite is deep water, which is helpful because like, you don't want the Trollocs to be OP, so they have to introduce some kind of way you can run, get away, escape them. So they establish here that any kind of deep water will basically do the trick. So they get across the river on the ferry, and the ferry is like the ferryman doesn't row the the ferryman doesn't row the ferry. He pulls it along with a rope, right? And so they get to the other side, and the ferry keeper wants to go back to the other side to rescue his son, because at this point the ferryman realizes that the Trollocs are coming, and it's dangerous, and he's concerned for his son, so he wants to go back to save his son. And Moraine says, yeah, basically, you're not going to do that, because all that's going to happen is then the Trollocs are going to jump on the ferry. They're going to kill you. They're going to kill your son. They're going to jump on the ferry, and then they're going to cross the river, and they're going to try to kill us. So the ferryman does not listen, and he jumps into the water to swim to the. They cut the rope. Moraine, or one of them.
I think land maybe.
Yeah, cuts the rope, and then the ferryman jumps in the water to swim to the ferry to try to get back across the water. And then Moraine does what?
Yeah, so basically, she creates a whirlpool with her magic or channeling, which hasn't been mentioned in the show before, but is when they tap into that power. It's called channeling, and the whirlpool swallows the ferry
Right.
up, and we see that the ferryman, the keeper, kind of chases after the ferry and gets sucked into the whirlpool.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and also we see on the other side, not only are there hundreds of Trollocs, but one of those fades.
The fades, yeah. The
Also-
fades look like Voldemort.
Yeah,
Are we agreeing on that? Because it seems really like, I hope we can all agree that that Rand looks like Hayden Christensen, and that the fades look like Voldemort. So that's my hill I'm going to die on for the rest of these episodes.
and the Trollocs are kind of like Minotaurs or
Yeah,
something like that.
they're pretty they're pretty traditional looking, I think, really, when it comes down to it. Which is fine. This is a series that's definitely based in like traditional kind of like orcs and monsters and fantasy, like traditional old school kind of fantasy tropes. So that's fine. Should expect some of that. So okay, so after that scene, we have a scene where they're all now riding away from the river, right? And is this the singing scene where they burst into song?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what happens? So they're leaving the river, and then tell us about the next scene.
Yeah, so I think it's the next day. They're sort of walking and kind of making camp, and all of them are having discussions now because they're finally able to have talk about what happened in the last episode, since they're not running as much, and they're talking about the dragon reborn again, and the fact that one of them may be the dragon. And I forget who said it, but some people say that the dragon will cause the end of the world. Others say that he's going to save it. So there's back and forth on that, and Moraine just basically says that the dragon is all of those things and none of them.
Yeah, she basically kind of shuts the conversation down, and it's like, why don't you guys stop talking about it and stop worrying about it, because none of us really know. Which is curious, because it's like, well, she must know to some degree, because she sniffed these 4 people out and is going through this whole huge ordeal to get them away from danger. So to say like, don't worry about it, who knows, seems a little bit disingenuous, because she must know with some degree of certainty that she's got one of the 4 is the the one she's looking for. But at any rate, I think the main takeaway here is that let's not worry about that for now. We have bigger fish to fry, like, for example, getting away from this horde of Trollocs and Fade. Okay, so next scene, they are sleeping, right?
Okay,
Okay,
they make camp and they're all
yeah. Tell us about that.
And so Moraine sort of wakes up Egwene, and they
By kind of waving her hand over her, right? She doesn't like physically touch her to wake her.
Yeah.
She dips into the what is it? The one source? Is that what it's they're calling?
The true source.
True source.
Or the one power.
Yeah. Okay. She dips into the one power to wake her up, rather than just poking her with her finger. So okay.
And they sort of go off separate so they can talk in private.
Yeah.
And one of the things they talk about is how the Aes Sedai take these oaths, and they cannot break these oaths as long as they're an Aes Sedai. And she has a fancy way of saying the oaths, and she says that it's very important to say the oaths the right way. But basically, what they are, as the first one is to speak no word not true. So an Aes Sedai can't tell a lie. So if you've been listening to what Maureen has said, everything she said is truth in one way or another. The second one is that they cannot make any weapons with their power. And the third one is to never use the one power as a weapon unless in self-defense, where they're going to die if they don't.
Right. It's in self-defense or in defense of another Aes Sedai
Yeah.
too, right? And I think there's even a third. Boy, I wish I
Yeah.
would have written those down. But yeah, there's a very like slim set of circumstances under which they can use their power to to kill or whatever, to for offensive purposes, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's a really interesting bit of lore, right? Because she says before that those were things that the Aes Sedai agreed to end some sort of siege at the White Tower.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she just kind of drops that. So we have no idea, like the viewer has no idea any of the other details about that. So apparently some amount of time ago, seems like it was quite a while ago, but it's not specified.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of siege at the White Tower. It's White Tower, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. There was some kind of siege at the White Tower
Mm-hmm.
that they were able to end by agreeing to these three sets of these three principles.
Yeah. Oaths.
Yeah, so I'd be really interested to learn like more about that. I hope that they
Yeah.
circle back to that on the show and explain that a little bit more.
Yeah. I think that, as you can see, there's a lot of different factions and Aes Sedai. Like we have Leandrin and we have Moraine, and maybe there's other factions, so maybe it has something to do with that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so then Moraine talks to Egwene more about the wind, right? What does she say about
yeah,
that
so they're still
exactly?
talking about about the Aes Sedai, and they talk about the one power and how strong women can become, and if they're trained. And they mentioned how the wisdom training has taught her to speak to the wind and listen to the wind. And Moraine basically says what we kind of speculated last episode was that this communication with nature is actually tapping into that one power. So Egwene herself could potentially be trained to be an Aes Sedai.
Right. Interesting.
Which I think Egwene obviously seems very interested in this scene.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. Why wouldn't she?
Yeah.
If someone came to you and said, "Well, you're far more powerful than you've been led to believe," you're like, "Okay, tell me more."
Right. So
Okay, so then we have that scene, and then we go into a dream sequence, basically with Rand. And I should note that my least favorite trope in any kind of TV or movie are dream sequences. I hate them. I just, there's some, I understand their place in a narrative. I understand that they're symbolic and they're foreshadowing, but man, they do nothing for me. That being said, tell us about Rand's dream.
yeah, so basically he thinks he's awake when he's in this dream. It feels real to him. And the first thing that happens is he actually is choking on something, right? And he ends up coughing up a bat.
Yeah, it's really gross.
Yeah. And then
And he didn't just
there's
cough it up like he coughed it up with like bat, like wing first. So he pulls out the wing body and then the other wing to prolong the whole spectacle as long as possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean he's still in the forest. So
Yeah.
that's part of why he thinks he's awake, is he's still in the forest.
Yeah, right.
And there's sort of an ominous kind of feel to the whole thing, and he looks out into the woods and he sees a figure staring at him, and
Yeah.
he's got a mask on and his eyes are glowing. Um, but yeah, he wakes up after that, right?
Right. So, and it's basically, it's a nightmare. He's having this nightmare, and then he has the bat chokes, or like, has the bat stuck in his throat, and pulls it out, and then he sees this specter in the woods or whatever, or some length of distance from him, and then he wakes up, and then um Moraine says, what's wrong, and then Rand tells Moraine about the dream, and Moraine panics and says something along the lines of, dreams have power, and if this ever happens again, did anyone else have a dream like this, and if you ever do, let me know right
Hmm.
away. But she doesn't expand on that at all. Like, she doesn't explain exactly why that's important. She just says that dreams have power, and then just kind of leaves it at that. And
Well,
I was really like frustrated by that scene, because I'm like, why is no one asking her questions? Like, Rand gets frustrated with her, right? And then Egwin gets frustrated with Rand and kind of
yeah,
sides with Moraine, right? So there's this kind of wedge being driven between Rand and Egwin, which is like, um, I think it's going to be a theme, right? Like, this
yeah,
is, this is the beginning of a storyline that's going to progress for at least a little bit, right? But I'm like, why don't they just ask her? Like, just
yeah.
ask this woman, like, why? Like, dreams have power. Let me know if this ever happens again. Okay, Maureen, why? Like, tell me, tell me more. But of course they don't, because it's a show and they want to kind of reveal these things at their own pace. So I get it, but it is kind of frustrating. It's frustrating when you see characters on the screen behave in a way that normal people would not behave, right? So
Well, I think if they asked her why, she might not even answer because,
yeah, but at least ask. Damn.
yeah, but like she has to tell the truth, so she might just say, "I don't want
Right.
to tell you right now," because then she's telling the truth. But then,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a good point, but at least ask. Like,
yeah,
I mean, that would give some kind of
which
satisfaction to the viewer, to like, well, at least these people are acting like normal human beings, and like, asking important questions like you would if you were in that situation. I mean, it's fine. It's fine if she would have said, I can't tell you, or I'll tell you later, or we don't have time for that right now, or
yeah,
any variety of responses would be acceptable. But what I don't find very acceptable is just having the characters not ask questions. Like,
yeah.
it's kind of, I don't know. Like, that got me.
The other thing to note, though, did you notice that the bat was actually um, in the real world too? So when
Yeah,
he wakes,
right. It was on the ground. It was like on the ground with its wings folded, though, wasn't moving.
yeah, and when he wakes up, he asks Perrin and I can't remember if it was Matt or Egwin, but they also had dreams about the bats, and
Yeah,
it was next to them too.
yeah, but they didn't speak up.
Yeah,
They didn't
so
say, which was weird
it's
too.
it's
Like,
not just Rand that was having the dreams; it's all of
yeah,
them.
right. And that's a good point. Like, why they also had dreams about bats, and then Moraine's like, did any of y'all
Yeah,
have any dreams about bats? And they're like, no. Like,
and he didn't
why?
mention the figure either. He didn't mention the guy,
Yeah, that's a curious scene. Like, that's
which is the same
weird.
problem in the books that where they don't tell each other things. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the show's fault.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, but the show has an opportunity to correct those kind of
Yeah.
things. Like,
So
I don't want to be like, I don't want to come across as being very negative here, although it's hard to deny
it
that
is
I am. But
frustrating.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, if you know that the book, like, like a pretty common trope in books, is that, a lot of times these massive plot points could be solved if one character just
Yeah.
said two sentences to the other character standing right next to them. And this is like
Yeah.
a super, another example of that. And the show had, every opportunity to remedy that by just having them ask the question. And you could, like, exactly what I said before, just they could have asked Moraine, and Moraine could have given any number of excuses, and
Yeah.
then they could have moved on,
As
and
long
that,
as the excuse was true. Yeah.
right, yeah, exactly. So
So
at
we'll
any
have to
rate, let's
see.
yeah, let's move on and talk about the White Cloaks.
Yeah, so Lan is sort of scouting ahead, right? And he
That
comes
seems to
back.
be his job. Yeah.
Yeah, he comes back
Oh,
and he sees that there's a group of white cloaks, and it's the same group as the beginning, right?
yeah.
So he warns them like there's white cloaks ahead. So Moraine hides her ring, and Lan takes it so that they don't see that she's an Aes Sedai.
Yeah. So Moraine gives Lan her ring, and Lan hides it like in his waistband or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then she instructs them like I'm just a noble or something like that. Like I'm not an Aes Sedai, and we're just passing through.
Right.
And so they and we didn't actually mention it, but Moraine is still injured from the previous night. So
Right. Yeah.
she sort of plays that up when they run into the White Cloaks.
Yeah. The White Cloaks basically come to her and they're kind of frisking her. They have some conversation. The White Cloaks and our heroes have a conversation, and the White Cloaks decide to kind of basically frisk
Yeah,
the parties, and they're frisking Moraine, and she kind of winces when they touch her like upper arm, and then where the audience is reminded that she's still injured from the battle at Two
yeah.
Rivers.
Um,
So yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about the White Cloak stuff. So the White Cloaks frisk them. Moraine, the Moraine says, "Oh, I was injured in and she tells him about the Two Cloaks, the Two Rivers
yeah,
battle, and then the White Cloaks, which is very clever. Like this whole, I felt like this might have been like the best scene
mm-hmm.
in the show. Um, so she tells the White Cloaks about her being injured at the battle in Two Rivers with the Trollocs and the Fade, and then the
Well,
White
and
Cloaks. Go ahead.
she actually mentions because they say where did you come from, and she says I came from Terran Ferry, and then they say where did you get injured, and she said I got in a fight with Trollocs. So she never actually says the Two Rivers that I can
Oh, you're
remember,
right. You're right. Yeah.
which is kind of interesting because she doesn't reveal where they were.
Yeah.
She just says the last place they were at, and then she
True.
says there was a battle, but she doesn't say where it was,
Yeah. That's a good
which is
point. Thank you.
cool.
Yeah. Um, but the big so yes, thank you. And the but the big thing here is that when the White Cloaks hear that they're Trollocs this far
Yeah,
south, right? South.
yeah, I think so. I'll have to
So
look at the
when
map.
yeah, when the White Cloaks find out that there's Trollocs in this area,
Hmm.
we'll say that they get very, I wouldn't say panicked, but they're very curious about why that is, because it's not common for Trollocs and Fade to be in this area.
Yeah,
And that basically distracts them from the people in front of them. So they're like, "Oh, really? Trollocs Fade in this area? Very curious. Okay, why don't you guys
yeah,
go on your way?" And they do. And um then they split up. The White Cloaks decide to split up,
yeah.
and one group of White Cloaks that are more of the warriors of the group decide to go investigate, go toward the ferry area, the ferry
I think he
town.
might have been a superior to the other guy too. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, I got that vibe too. So the town with the ferry is called what again?
I think it's just called Terran Ferry.
Terran Ferry. So that group, those White Cloaks go toward Terran Ferry to investigate, and
Hmm.
then the other group, including the Aes Sedai hunter, they
Hmm.
decide they're going to peel off because they don't want to be involved in a battle like that, which is funny because
Yeah,
they're they consider themselves uh, too high a worth to dirty their hands with these big battles. They
hmm,
are just Aes Sedai hunters and nothing more. They don't want to. I guess they don't
yeah.
want to get involved in a battle with Trollocs and the Fade. And these people, their business is with the Aes Sedai, so they splinter off.
Hmm.
Okay.
And the other thing that was interesting was Moraine is kind of asking them if they can heal her, and the one I forget which one it was says the only person who can heal that would be an Aes Sedai, which is interesting because they don't normally like them, but they suggest that she finds one.
Right. Well, first they say something about it comes up, the topic comes up of why don't you heal yourself?
Yeah.
And then she says we can't like imagine, like we can't use magic on ourselves or something along those lines. Like Aes Sedai can't use the magic to heal on
Hmm.
themselves. Another Aes Sedai has to heal you, and that's one of the reasons we travel in packs. So if one of us
Yeah,
gets
she
hurt,
says that in the
yeah,
next scene once
yeah.
they're gone
Oh,
from.
I'm okay. I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah, but
So
you're right.
yeah, okay, so let's leave that scene. So that scene ends with the
Hmm.
our group of heroes going on, continuing on,
Yeah.
and the White Cloaks splitting off. And then,
Yeah, so
uh,
that's when Moraine is, they're sort of walking in their group, and Moraine is just talking to Egwin, and Egwin, I think, asks her, "Why couldn't you heal yourself?" And that's when she says that. That's
right,
why we travel in packs. So,
yeah, which is interesting. That's a good bit. That's an interesting bit of lore. So I
hmm,
was, uh,
yes.
I stowed that away in my head, and I'm like, okay, good,
So, like with
good thing to know.
Leandrin, there's a group of three of them that were traveling together.
Yeah,
But in her case, she's alone with Lan
yeah.
right now in this mission or whatever you want to call it.
So in the next scene, or in continuing on with the scene, they begin to sing a song. And Ryan, I'm here to tell you that this was the cringiest moment in the series so far. I'm like, why are they? It's not that they're singing so much; it's that they sound good. Like that's the problem I had. I was like, these guys actually sound like they practice. Like they're. This sounds too good. Like what? This doesn't seem realistic, but
I
pretty
think I just kind
cringe.
of
Yeah.
didn't notice because I was so interested in what they were talking about. I didn't notice how well
Yeah,
they.
and that's the point, right? It's like to convey the content of what they're saying rather than how they're saying it. But
And I kind of
so,
appreciated that after, because one of the things we said about the first episode was how fast paced it was. That now we actually do get some scenes where it's not so breakneck.
yeah, I agree. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the very
Yeah.
end.
So we can
Um,
talk about that later. But
yeah, definitely. So they sing the song about so they're
Manethering.
on, yeah, so they're on their horses, and they break in the song about Manetheren and how the people of Manetheren fought to protect their city against what they call the Dark One, right?
Yes, and it, well, I think it was during the Trolloc Wars, so it would have been after the breaking of the world.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
Dark One is not necessarily in the picture, but they're still the forces of the Dark One,
Right.
the
So we're
Trollocs.
yeah, right. So we're supposed to assume or whatever, assume that that is the Trollocs in the Fade.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is like a myth, not a myth, but like a saga
Hmm.
of the warriors of Manetheren holding out against this huge army of the dark of the Trollocs and so
Yeah.
forth. And this myth says that the Manetheren had sent out um
Like
had
basically aid.
yeah, had asked for sent people out asking for aid from other cities and towns, and they replied, some of them at least replied and said we can be there in 3 days to help,
Hmm.
just hold out for 3 days. So the Manetheren held out against all odds, incredibly they were able to hold out for 3 days, but after 3 days no one showed up, and so they continued to fight and to repel the Trollocs and the and so forth for 13 days. And on the
Hmm.
13th day, they fell. I think that's what
Yeah, the city was basically ruined.
yeah. Um, so that
And
was an interesting bit of lore there too. Like I like how they're filling in some of
yeah,
the backstory and the lore of the world.
and she talked about how the queen was a powerful magic user. So I don't know if she said she was
Right.
an Aes Sedai, but she was powerful.
Yeah, I mean, they could be setting that up to be like the queen of Manetheren was the first Aes Sedai, or
Hmm.
the ruler of the Aes Sedai, or whatever. I don't know. It's hard to say whether or not that will come back up in
Hmm.
in future episodes or whatever, but it's worth noting just in case it does.
Yeah,
Okay, so our next scene is with Perrin. So Perrin
yeah.
is still not telling anybody. Perrin has a leg wound, and he's not telling anybody about his leg wound for reasons that I don't quite understand.
it's another case where they're not sharing information with each other.
Right. Yes,
And
exactly.
I think um, he got this when he was fighting the Trolloc and
Yeah.
he accidentally killed his wife.
Yeah, almost definitely. So I don't understand if he's not telling people about it because he doesn't want to talk about the whole incident
Yeah,
because it's traumatic for him because he killed his wife. Like I
he's
get
got some
that.
PTSD.
Yeah, or if it's because if there's something um maybe there's some kind of uh maybe if you get wounded by a Trolloc like that, then you are poisoned somehow in a way that makes you crazy. Like, I'm just guessing, I'm taking wild guesses here, but like maybe if you get wounded by a Trolloc, you eventually will kind of go crazy and not become yourself and whatever. So maybe he's worried that he's hiding that because he doesn't want them to shun him, like you've
Yeah,
been bonded by a Trolloc and you're going to go crazy in a week. And so we need to, drown you in the river before you become a problem. Like, I
we'll
just
have to
don't know.
see.
Like, yeah, I just like want to know, like, why is Perrin hiding this? Like, it's the biggest secret in the world. And why is the show creating all of these, why is the show creating opportunities for Perrin to roll up his pant leg and to remind us once again that he has a leg wound and without explaining why is this, some kind of big secret for him. Anyway,
I
Perrin,
think they're trying to create tension
I guess,
for
but it seems
yeah.
really, yeah, I'm not a fan.
And I
Anyway,
think one of the other things is he not only is he worried about his wife or that he killed his wife, he's also probably thinking like, "Am I the dragon?"
yeah,
And
but
so,
still,
yeah, he's also going through that in his head. Like, if I'm the dragon, what's going to happen? Is everyone going to shun me? This.
okay. But they could all, but to be fair, the other three could be that
Yeah,
could be the same. They don't seem to have that problem. I mean, not every, whatever, people deal with things differently in their own
yeah,
way, so whatever. But that's not something unique to Perrin. But and anyway, we should
yeah. It's
let's
just part
move
of it.
on. Yeah. So Perrin is, showing us his leg wound, and then he's confronted by a pack of wolves.
Like maybe half a dozen.
Yeah, like a good amount, an intimidating amount of wolves. And so but for reasons that aren't explained, one of the wolves just kind of calmly approaches Perrin and begins to lick his wound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
we're
that's it.
not.
Like, there's no other explanation. Then the scene ends.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I think they're just.
they're setting something up,
Yeah, they're
definitely.
leaving you wondering what is going on with him.
Yeah, well, mission accomplished there. Okay, so our next scene involved the Trollocs. Do you want to
Yeah.
go over
So
that?
it's getting to be the evening now, and um, the Trollocs finally catch up with them, and Moraine is getting so weak to the point now where she has to be carried by Perrin, and they're sort of in like paranoia mode, almost like they don't know what to do.
Yeah, they're panicking. Yeah.
Yeah, so they start basically fleeing again, and they get to a wall, a city wall, with a
Yeah.
crack in it, right?
Yeah.
And Lan makes a decision that they're gonna take refuge in this abandoned city,
Yeah.
and he says it's called Shadar Logoth, and it was another city that was basically a stronghold during the Trolloc Wars.
Right.
And he says that it's in the old tongue, it means shadows waiting, which is the
Yeah,
title
that's
of
our title reveal,
the
our
episode.
title reference.
Yeah. So, what did you think about the city?
The city itself is cool. Like, I love the imagery of a big walled city like that with the
Mhm.
crack run, the vertical crack running down it to give them entrance into it.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of a cursed city. And then once they get into the city, the visual, like the architecture of the city is really cool. Like, it's just like that is a really cool setting. Like, they really
Yeah.
do a good job of that. I couldn't help but be reminded of like the wall in Game of Thrones and
Yeah.
the Night's Guard or the Night's Watch and all that. But it was really cool. Like, I really
Yeah.
did enjoy that. Like, I think that was if the encounter with the White Capes was the
Yeah.
kind of highlight of for me, like as far as like the dialogue and the back and forth and all that, um if that was the highlight of the show for me from like a script standpoint, like a storytelling standpoint, then this was definitely the highlight, the highlight for me as far as like visuals go. Like I
Yeah.
really enjoyed like how they built that area or whatever.
One thing I saw, it was in I think it was in the Entertainment Weekly article before the show aired. They actually said that they built this entire set from the ground up just for this episode.
Really?
Yeah,
Like how much of it did they build though? Like
I don't remember, but
okay.
a significant amount. I mean, obviously the um, like the skyline and the shot when they're standing on the top was CGI, but
Right, when they're looking out over the
yeah,
rest of the city or whatever. That's interesting. I'd like to see pictures of that to see what's
yeah, like the
green.
set.
Yeah, what's green screen and what's actually physical props or whatever.
Hmm.
So
And
they go into the city, and they talk about how it was a powerful city during the Trolloc Wars. And
and
they,
remember Land says, "Don't take anything and don't touch anything."
right, yeah, Land's like, don't, like, they're like, why, like, what is, I guess somebody asked, like, what is the curse? Like, why is nobody here? Like, why is
Yeah.
this city abandoned or whatever? And Land's like, again, it's like another instance of not giving very much information. So Land just says, don't, don't touch anything. Like we need to get, we're not gonna be staying here. But so in the meantime, don't touch anything and don't wander off, basically.
Yeah.
And it probably is important to note that at some point they mentioned that this city walled itself in during the Trolloc Wars
Hmm.
to try to protect itself. Like it was one of the cities that said, it was one of the cities that said that it was going to help Manethrin,
Hmm.
but it didn't. Instead, it said, yeah, it told Manethrin, we're going to come and help you. But then what it did instead is build a huge wall around itself
Right.
to try to wait out the war or whatever. At any rate, Land tells them not to wander off and not to touch anything. So of course, someone's going to wander off and touch things. And
Yeah.
in this case, it's Matt with one T. Matt with one T can't.
Is that your nickname?
Yeah, for sure. Hayden Christensen, Voldemort, and Matt with one T wakes up. I guess he can't sleep, or whatever,
He's just
and he's
his
wandering.
personality will not allow him to sit still on
Sure,
something like
he's,
this.
yeah, he's too much of a rogue. Rogues can't
Yeah.
sleep throughout the night, so he gets up and it's looking around, and he finds a box, and he
Yep.
opens the box, and inside the box is a dagger.
Hmm.
So soon after he opens the box and finds this dagger, this black
Yeah.
this black creeping power starts to permeate through the ground and kills a horse. We see it kill a horse, which was a pretty amazing scene. Like that scene,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that was really well done. Um, but
And
before we
it's
talk more about that, like, did you think that when Matt with one T opened the box and
mhm.
found the dagger, that like unleashed that power? Or do you think those things happened separately?
I think it might be related because of the city's curse and he touched something, but we'll have to see.
Right. I think so too. I think it's too big of a coincidence to not be related.
And
It
they
would
don't
be too big of a coincidence.
yeah, they don't say in the episode, but the name of the entity is called Mashadar.
Mashadar. Okay.
Yeah.
So it
Just
starts, yeah.
trivia.
So yeah, thank you. That's part of the reason I enjoy talking with you about the show, because you've actually read the books and can remember this stuff. So the black, well, we're gonna call it the creeping Black Death,
Yeah.
Mashadar, starts creeping through. It kills the horse in a impressive scene of special effects, and then it starts overtaking parts of the city, and so the group has to start running away because they don't want to
Yeah.
be
And I think
touched
Moraine
by it.
has a moment of consciousness where she's like, "Why did you take us here to land?"
Right. And Land's basically like, I had no choice. I had no,
Because
what
the
did you,
Trollocs don't go there
yeah, what do you want
because
me to do?
something
Right.
worse is
Yeah.
there.
So as a result of this, what happens is what I was really hoping, what I was really hoping for, which is that as this episode is progressing, maybe I should save this for a little bit for the end, but as the episode is progressing, I'm like, are they just of all the characters going to stick together, or some of them going to
Yeah.
split off? Because I think shows that I think it could be a more interesting show if we can move through locations. Like if
Mhm.
all of the characters are always at the same location and always together, that I think that becomes a real challenge to keep that interesting. And especially if all the locations are just going to be forest, like if they're just going to be walking, 10 episodes. I don't know how many episodes this
That's
series is
8
supposed to be.
episodes.
8. Okay. So we're going to have 8 hours of them literally all together walking through a forest. Like that's probably not sustainable.
Yeah.
So as a result of them running away from the creeping Black Death, they get separated. And I like how they did this because it seems very natural, like that they
Yeah.
were separating as they're like evading the creeping Black
And
Death.
because like Rand wakes up and he goes off with Egwin, and for whatever reason, like they're kind of having discussion, and they talk about how she's going to become an Aes Sedai, or she might want to, so she leaves him, and she's with Perrin when everything starts to go down.
Yeah.
So she gets separated with him. Rand meets up with Matt, and Lane and Moraine are together.
Right. So exactly. So the result of this, as you said, is Matt with 1T and Rand are
Yeah,
off on their own.
and they sort of
Perrin,
jump off the wall into the river.
yeah, that's a nice scene too. So Matt with 1T and Rand jump off the wall. Perrin and Egwin are together and they're
Yeah.
fleeing. And then Lan and Moraine, of course, are together, which makes sense. And so they're off together, and then at the very end of the episode, I love a good cliffhanger at the end. Why don't you tell us what the
Yeah.
big reveal is at the end?
So Lan is sort of tending to Moraine. They're in the forest now, and someone comes up to him, like with a knife, right, or a
Yeah.
sword, something like that. And it's Nynaeve, and she says, "Where are the others?"
So
So she did
Nynaeve,
not die from the Trollocs.
Nynaeve is alive. I told my wife as we were watching this show when because they talk about her a little bit earlier, and I'm like, the way that they're talking about her makes me believe that she's definitely not dead, because at the beginning they say something about a Trolloc throwing her. Like I don't remember who is recounting this story, but
I think Egwin.
okay, so Egwin or whoever is like, what happened to Nynaeve? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I saw a Trolloc grab her and throw her, and I
Drag
never
her
saw,
away.
yeah, and I never saw her again. And I'm like, okay, so what they're telling us is that no one saw her die, which basically means she's alive and she's going to show up at some point. And sure enough, she shows up, which is great. Like, it would have been weird for them to spend all that time in episode 1 building up that character to just kill her off and then
Yeah.
have her not
Well,
show back up.
and they said she could be one of the potential dragons. So
Yeah, like that's another good point. Like, why?
there's 5
Yeah.
potential.
Right. And that ends our episode. So why don't we're about 41 minutes in here, 43 minutes in. Do you want to talk a little bit about your overall thoughts of the episode?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Was this a better episode than episode 1?
I still can't decide because I've seen a lot of people online say they prefer episode 2, but I still like the introduction to all the characters, so I can't decide. But I like them both for different reasons.
I greatly prefer this episode
Yeah,
to
that's what
episode
I've seen the
1.
general consensus.
Yeah, this was much better. And it goes back to, I'll just refer back to something I said on our first podcast, which was that episode 1s are hard for shows. Like I think I said previously that I often try not to judge a TV show on an episode 1, because they're trying to do a lot of heavy lifting in an episode 1. They're trying to introduce all the characters. They're trying to introduce the overall plot. They're trying to introduce the conflicts. They're trying to introduce who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, and they're trying to introduce the settings. And they're trying to build the world. And they're trying to do all this. They're really trying to get stuck in on episode 1. And so that often comes across as like kind of being hurried or incomplete, or
which we kind of saw.
or
noted.
or just crammed with a bunch of exposition because they don't have time to show you things. So they just have to tell you things in kind of information dumps. But so yeah, so that's we saw some of that at least in episode 1. And so I feel like in this episode they were able to kind of establish a more establish like a rhythm of the episode, like a pacing that that can carry us through for the rest of the episodes, and kind of reveal some lore of the some lore to the story in a way that comes across very natural and interesting. And they're able to show us things where because they can kind of take their time and develop the story in a more comfortable pacing. So yeah, so I thought episode 2, I really greatly prefer this to episode 1. I didn't hate episode 1 or anything like that, don't get me wrong, but I do think that episode 2 is the, for me, it's the better episode.
Yeah. So, but I like them both. So it's good that they were able to, get the pace slowed down a little bit and focus more on the characters in this one.
Yeah, and like I said before too, they were able to kind of uh I'm anticipating episodes moving forward, episodes 3, 4, 5, etc., being a little bit more dynamic, because
Yeah.
we're going to have the crew, the cast is now splintered off in at least 3 groups. So we
Mhm.
have the 3 groups that have splintered off of our the main characters, and then you have I don't know if they may go back to the White Cloaks, and they may go back to Two Rivers. So I'm kind of hoping that we get to see more um like locations, instead of
Yeah.
just having them all located in this whatever forest area, because they're all trying to get to the White Tower. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe they find some way to show us other locations, and follow the
Yeah.
White Cloaks. I'd be really interested in having the White Cloaks being kind of like a point of view character group as we move through the series. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I think that would be interesting.
Yeah. They're definitely, to me, they're just as interesting as the group of Aes Sedai led by Leandrin.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, any more overall impressions that you want to mention?
I think we covered pretty much everything.
Okay, we'll end it there. This was episode 2 of Pattern of the Ages. If you would like to leave us some feedback, you can email us at patternoftheages@gmail.com. That's patternoftheages@gmail.com. And until next time, we'll see you later.
See ya.